Hi, I'm Pete Maldonado, the CEO of Chomps, and I'm excited to welcome you to Chompcast, a Chomps original podcast where we'll have 15 to 30-minute fireside chats focused on the CPG industry.
And I'm Rashid Ali, the COO. Together, we'll be sharing valuable insights, advice, and real-world examples with aspiring and current business owners. We're happy to have you here along for the ride.
Welcome to episode 8 of Chompcast, where we interviewed Christina Chu, a Chicago-based dietitian. Christina Chu, our Chompian of the month. Great to meet you. Thank you for joining us. Please tell us all about yourself.
Of course. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. So my name is Christina Chu. I'm a performance dietitian based out of Chicago, specifically in the West Loop, as we were just talking about. And I basically work with athletes and high performers to help them fuel their body to optimize their performance. So I've worked with athletes from youth all the way up to professional of all different types of sports as well. I work with, corporate executives, creatives, and people all of different sorts and walks of life to help them with their nutrition.
That's awesome. So tell me about, so performance nutrition and performance dietitian. Can you explain a little bit more about, obviously you're athlete focused, and maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your, how do you go about that?
Yeah, so performance nutrition is really about how you feel and how you perform in your body. So if you think about it from an athlete perspective, they need to be the most highest level athlete that they can be, right? Performing well on the field, on the court, on the ice, whatever their mode is. And with that, you have to feel good in your body. We have to have tons of energy, minimizing any symptoms that are out of the ordinary, and making sure that we're recovering well from injuries and just overall training stressors. There's a lot more that goes into it, but I would say that those are the top ones. So it's tying nutrition into that. How can we help them be the best athletes possible with the food and the fuel that they put into their body? So that's more so of the performance realm, but that ties into so many other different people and career paths as well too. So staying mentally sharp and mentally focused, making sure that we're eating our snacks or building our meals right, like that applies to all of us since everybody eats. So it really does expand beyond athletes as well too.
When you say that, the performance side of it, I think of Michael Phelps. I think when he was in the Olympics, everyone talked about his diet and the amount of calories he was consuming. I'd assume that when you're working with athletes, depending on if they're gearing up for some sort of event versus everyday training, does it evolve? It's not necessarily a single plan. I have to assume it's adjust based on whatever their load is.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. In the case of Michael Phelps, I think is a great example. He's someone who has a high energy output, right? And that the classic news example of Michael Phelps eating, 12,000 calories per day. And your average Joe is like, oh, well, if I eat, McDonald's every day, I'll look just like Michael Phelps. It's well, there's a slight disconnect there in that we're not an Olympic level athlete. But it's that, right? In his case, even though McDonald's may not be the best for the rest of us, perhaps it was actually the best thing in his case to help him meet his energy needs. So absolutely, there's a difference. And, he wasn't eating like that every single day when he was in his off season, focusing more on, I'm hoping he was focusing more on those healthful foods. But yes, absolutely, there's a difference between Olympic level competition, game days, races versus just everyday general nutrition.
So I saw you work with a bunch of combat athletes. Weight cuts, those are probably one of the more difficult things to navigate. So can you talk a little bit about that? How do you handle that with your athletes?
Oh, yeah, that is probably one of my top areas of expertise. And what I love to do is help these weight class athletes. So for the audience, these are people like wrestlers, MMA, boxers, jiu-jitsu, anyone along those levels. And it is a complicated process. I will say it's almost like a prescription in that we have to follow them pretty closely. But generally speaking, with weight cuts, it's a year-round camp. So it's not just 6 or 8 weeks, it happens year round. We'll see a lot of athletes tend to just be super dialed in for their camp, let's say 8 weeks, and then forget about the other 40 plus weeks of the year, when in fact we need to focus on that year round. It doesn't mean maintaining their weight exactly as it is when they weigh in, and just having them walk around at that, but at least being somewhat focused and prioritizing your nutrition year round. Then come into camp, we're really focused on that weight descent while maintaining adequate energy intake. So keeping their energy levels up, matching their training schedules, and making sure they have their snacks. And I will say hydration is a huge piece for these weight class athletes, making sure they're drinking enough fluids, getting in their electrolytes, all that fun jazz.
What led you to this profession?
Great question. There certainly is a long story, but just to keep it short, in the nutrition realm, I knew I wanted to be a dietitian since I was a junior or senior in high school. It was one of those, like, I'm going to college to become a dietitian, no questions asked. I loved nutrition. I loved food from a young age. I grew up in a huge foodie family, and that just kind of transpired into my adult years. I went to school out in Boston. I went to Boston University for both my bachelor's and my master's degree, and thought I wanted to work in the corporate space. I thought I wanted to work with, 9-to-5ers, like helping them maintain their healthy habits. And I did have the chance to work in that population and loved it. But I was inching for something more. It's actually pretty funny. I thought I didn't want to work with athletes. I thought, in my head, very naive. I'm happy to admit it. I was thinking, what could these athletes possibly need help with? I had the Michael Phelps example, right? And you're like, well, he's so fit, he's so active. There's nothing I can do from a nutrition perspective. But in reality, it's the complete opposite. These are athletes who do have nutrition and health needs. They are just really good at covering it up. And so once I thought, what's the next level? I want to work with athletes. I sought the opportunities to get there. And as soon as I was exposed to the athlete population, I was like, yes, this is a group that I want to work with. I fell in love with it. And then my brain goes, okay, what is the hardest athlete to work with? And my head goes, weight class athletes, right? They're not only athletes, but on top of that, they have to make weight. Every other athlete can walk around at, a rough, weight range, but it's not like they need to step on a scale or else they're not able to compete. And so in my head, I thought weight class athletes, that's the most challenging cases. I'm a problem solver and I like a challenge. And so that's what naturally gravitated me towards that specialization within sports. It's been an awesome journey thus far, working with these athletes. And I mean, it's just crazy to reflect back upon it.
Yeah, and it's funny because those guys, like you mentioned, these are top class athletes. They're super fit. They look like they must know everything, And the same thing, you think about like bodybuilders, right? Those guys are the most fit people in the world, and you realize a lot of those guys have their own coaches and trainers and nutritionists, working with them on all things. So that leads me to my next question, I think, and this is the reason really that we founded Chomps, is because there was so much conflicting information out there. There's so many so-called diet experts, nutrition experts, just giving conflicting info. I mean, you can look up one blog that'll tell you that you need your carbs, and another one tells you cut carbs completely. And then it's what do you go with? And so how do you navigate that and dealing with your clients?
Oh, yes, that is certainly a tricky space to navigate. And I think I mentioned this on the Chompian of the Month feature. But truly, as a dietitian, I know that I'm just one voice. Let's be realistic. I'm one voice in their world of nutrition, where they get information online from athletes they look up to, from friends, family, parents, blogs, everything of the sort. And it's just me as their dietitian or a dietitian that they know of. And so it is certainly a challenging world to navigate, but for me, what matters the most is the science. And so what is best for this athlete, not from a PR perspective, not from marketing, not from anecdote. So like my personal experience. So AKA, here's what I did. So this is what you should do. I'm viewing this as a clinician of here's my patient or my client. Here's all of their things that they're experiencing. Here's what they've tried. What is the best solution from what I know about nutrition and metabolism? And that's what it's always fundamental for me. And it's very helpful to have, 2 science degrees to, to back that up. And I sat there and I memorized a Krebs cycle. Like there was one point in my life where that happened. And, of course, the mitochondria is a powerhouse of the cell. Like we know that it's been drilled into our head. But it's a challenging world out there with nutrition information. And so I try to be at least one small part of it to help, make that a lot more easier to digest, no pun intended.
So are you generally, you're probably not cutting out entire macronutrients out of diets, and it's more balanced, I'm assuming. And so are you doing more like macro tracking, or what in general, like how are you setting your clients up?
Yeah. So when I work with my clients, everybody's different. Some athletes don't like to track at all. Some love to. And I really try and get their gauge on it. For example, I have some athletes who prefer to weigh their food out and track their macros, put it in a calorie counter. And that really does not bring them anxiety or stress. It brings them peace. So that's the route that we go. However, a lot of my athletes, that's a lot of work. And the least thing that they have is time. And so that actually is very anxiety inducing and stressful for them. And instead, what we do is we track exactly what they're eating through pictures. So a picture says 1,000 words. And in a picture, I'm able to see what the composition of their meal looks like. I'm able to see where they're eating. Are they eating, in their car or at home or in their dorm room or wherever it may be. And so by tracking their photos, something that I'm trained in is to be able to make that kind of visual assessment and estimate how much they're consuming and see if that's the best fit for them. So that's part of my skill set. And, obviously it gets better with time, but that's the route that I think works best. And that's the route that I'm going to do. But it really is client dependent.
There's a lot of value in that. I could say, I used to track macros like religiously and weighing my food and all that. You get really good at just eyeing it, but if I just snap a picture and be like, "Hey, Christina, what does it look like to you?" It'd be very
Exactly. Yep, that's what I'm here for.
So when an athlete comes to you, what does it look like for you to start? I'd assume like at some point you mentioned weight, right? So there's some sort of baseline you're tracking. Weight's probably one of the metrics, but what else are you tracking? Is there a number of are you taking blood, other samples, measurements, things like that? I'm just out of curiosity, so you can measure performance and even define what success looks like for them.
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting. Nutrition is so subjective all the time. Even with, and I'm sure you guys know this, with the labels on our food, there is a variance between the exact, calories and macronutrients that they put, because every grain of wheat, every processing system is going to be completely different. So we need to have some sort of wiggle room in our labels. So there's not a lot of nutrition numbers that are extremely accurate. Calorie calculation, these are all based on estimations. There are some lab testing that you can do. They're just expensive. Some of my athletes do it, but the majority of them don't, just because it is a pretty expensive out-of-pocket cost. Instead, what we do track and monitor is more so like symptoms. So weight could be one of them, and weight is certainly a focus for a lot of my athletes. But, how are you feeling when you're training? Are you taking longer water breaks? Do you feel like you need to take a nap right after you work out? How long are you sore for? Is it, a whole week from one workout, which could be a sign of underfueling, or are you recovering pretty quickly? How are you sleeping? What are your bowel movements like? Do we feel bloated, nauseous, indigestion? The list goes on, but we're more so tracking like their subjective self-assessment, which takes a lot of mental maturity to do so and be so introspective. But that's really what we're tracking. And that's what I find that most people truly care about. When they're thinking about weight, in the end, it's not about the number on the scale. It's about them feeling good in their body, them, running their race, them, being able to play with their kids and not feel any pain, or for them to not be stressed out about their nutrition. Like, that's truly what matters to them. And so those are the measurements that we utilize.
So I have a question for you. So we try not to be too Chomps focused on Chompcast and be too self-promoting, but I do have a question though. So being a dietitian and knowing that you've recommended Chomps to your clients before, I always wanted to understand, like, how exactly are you recommending your clients use Chomps? Are you recommending with another product, or how is that?
Yeah. So it depends per client, but one of the most popular ways that I use Chomps is to do it either as a post-workout or some kind of snack while they're on the go. Most of my athletes and clients are very busy people, constantly on the road. If they're a student athlete, from class to class, and they only have time to sit down, enjoy a meal, sit down, have a snack. They're usually go. And so I typically recommend it as some kind of on-the-go snack or post-workout, and usually they're running off to something else. Typically, I pair it with some kind of fruit or some kind of carbohydrate. Most of my athletes tend to underfuel on their carbs, and so it's a really easy pairing for them. And that way they don't feel like they're just eating a jerky stick. They're able to pair it with like a piece of fruit, some crackers, fruit bars, stuff like that.
It's a good recommendation. I like it. All right. Thank you.
Christine, I'm curious. So you mentioned like sometimes you can take photos of the food and that's how you're gauging what they're eating. But I mean, we're surrounded now by so much technology, and you see all the wearables and sleep tracking and activity trackers. I'm just curious, have you been able to, are there any technologies that you're working with your clients on helping them better track various things in their day?
Yeah. So no, I totally get it. I have an Oura Ring and a Whoop myself. It's not something that I require them to do. Again, for me, they work with me out of pocket. No one is paying for them to work with me. It is an investment that they choose, and so that's something that I want to respect. However, a lot of them do have Whoops, Oura Rings, Apple Watches, Fitbits, Garmin's, and that is information that we can take and we can just be aware of. I rarely will make head-on decisions based on a wearable, simply because they're so new, and I don't think that they're at the level of accuracy that I would want them to do and to be at. And I want to be like the best of service to my athletes, and I don't really want to steer them in the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. However, having something like a sleep tracker is helpful because it keeps them on track of making sure that they're getting enough sleep or going to bed consistently. How is that affecting their breakfast choices in the morning and or their night snack choices? And those are more so the metrics that we watch out for. But there isn't too much correlation. I think also alcohol is another thing. So drinking, and then what is your recovery or your sleep like the night afterwards? That is certainly a huge area of improvement for a lot of my athletes. But it's not something that I would make like a game time decision on as a dietitian for now.
It seems like there's a lot, like when we have a decent pulse on the startups and things that are working on, but there seems to be like a lot of biometric type tracking technologies that are still in early stages, but thinking about, I eat something, what does it do to my blood sugars? Are things spiking? How are different foods impacting me? Obviously, I think it's more so on the direct consumer base, but it's pretty exciting to see. Again, you're not making key decisions, but it's just making you more astute. Like if you're like scratching your head, like, why are they feeling tired or fatigued, or why aren't they sleeping well? Trying to figure out, like you said, it's like a science problem, right? You're trying to figure out all the different variables to work it out. So it's pretty interesting to see, how you'll be able to leverage that technology as it continues to come out.
Yeah, and I'm a huge science junkie. Always have been, always will be. And I think something that's important, from a clinician perspective to keep in mind is also like the user error almost, right? And as a user, you're the one responsible for that information. And I'll have, my clients come up to me who are like, I've noticed this slight difference in this measurement. I'm like, it could very much so be the wearable. Like, it's not always you. And so I definitely see some value, but I think as a user, like you need to use the product correctly. And our body has all of these biometrics that it gives us. Sometimes we just ignore it. So hunger fullness cues are a huge one that our body sends us, right? It tells us when we're hungry, it tells us when we're full. And that is something that a lot of people tend to ignore, but will trust, a wearable instead. And I'm like, we've been bred for thousands of years to have these cues. Like, let's tap into that. So there is some value in sort of our natural hormonal systems, our natural signals that we just sometimes tend to ignore. But I want to, bring light to that and bring awareness to that, and that we can use these two together to then make the best decision for that person.
So, Christina, we mentioned earlier that you were our Chompian of the month. And when we interviewed you for that, you mentioned something to me. And as another business founder, you mentioned that you started your practice in the height of the pandemic. Can you tell us about that and like what that experience was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I became a dietitian in February of 2020. I had we all didn't know what was going on at that moment, just living my best life. I was still in Boston at the time. And naturally, a month later, everything started to shut down. And it put me in a really tricky situation. In the moment, I didn't really think about it as clearly as I do now in reflection. But I mean, it was really scary, right? No one knew what was going on. I just, finally was able to work, and then suddenly, no one was hiring. And it put me in a sticky situation, but I'm really glad that it did it to get me to where I am today. But it got to the point of logistics, of finances, where shoot, I was still paying rent, but there was very minimal income coming in just because there were no job opportunities. And I had to take matters into my own hand. And I get a lot of questions from young RDs, dietetic students who are like, how did you do it? And I think the environment that I was in just pushed me to create my LLC, to start my business. And I've always known that there was a need for dietitians and that I had something special to give to athletes. And, I in the end, it's twisted, but I am grateful for that experience. And I'm not showing the struggles and the stress and the late nights and the like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? All of that sure did happen. But I think, diamonds form under pressure. It was a very isolating experience, right? To start something and literally you were advised against seeing people face to face. So trying to build some sort of virtual presence as everybody was. I moved to Chicago during that time as well too. So I knew nobody, and just trying to network and make connections. Ethics are really important for me. So I like to make genuine connections. It's never like, a slimy kind of way to connect with people. I try to be as authentic as I can. And just one thing after another. And I think right time, right place. And I'll be honest, I haven't spent a single dollar on marketing. Everything has been based on referrals and positive words from my clients, which I'm so appreciative of. So can't believe it's been over 2 years, but here I am.
That's amazing. Not spending any money on marketing is kudos to you. That's huge. You've obviously carved out a niche for yourself and doing a great job. People want results. And so if you're giving them results, it's going to pay for they're gonna tell the next client for you. So that's amazing. So, all right, good to hear that.
Christina, what brought you to Chicago?
So personal, I live with my boyfriend and we were both, able to move, and we were like, Boston did what it was supposed to do. It's time for us to move to a new location. My family is from Chicago, and so it was close to home for me, but he ended up landing a job here just out of coincidence. So my parents were super thrilled, but we said, hey, let's go to Chicago. And the first time we set foot in our apartment was when we moved in. So we never got to tour the space. I remember looking on Google Maps and just like looking through the area and being like, okay, I think I could live here. And then just move, packed our boxes, June 2020, and flew here, one-way ticket.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, you for the listeners, we were chatting earlier before we kicked things off, and you're in the West Loop, but you just happened to pick up one of the better neighborhoods in Chicago, and we actually Chomps has an office there, and there's an awesome vibe there, and you picked a good spot.
It's amazing. A big food, like huge area, lots of like startups and a younger crowd, amazing coffee shops, first and foremost. Let's not ignore the obvious. But just a great place to be.
For sure. So you've been doing the dietitian thing for a while. Anything that you've learned over the years that you wish you knew from the start?
I can definitely say when I first started my business, I wish I knew that everything was just going to be okay. You can't predict the future. So I think it's a good pressure to experience, but at the same time, it was so scary. And I just wish like I had that trust and faith in myself to be like, it'll all be okay. Like you will, you will be able to live the lifestyle that you want to live. Just give it some time versus like expecting it now. So I wish I just like took that breather earlier on, and just honestly trusted myself, in like my business and my experience.
Yeah. My dad always said, if you find a job you love and you'll never have to work a day in your life, right? If folks are doing the right thing and are passionate about it, like it will all work out.
Yeah. And that's scary in the moment. Like later on, you're like, oh,
it's easier to say.
Yeah.
So Christina, let's shift gears a little bit here. So I want to get into some personal stuff. So you said you're working your butt off, getting this practice off the ground. Just imagine you had an entire week off to yourself. What do you do?
I'm out of here. I'm traveling. I'm booking a ticket on Southwest and I'm going somewhere. If you were saying right now, we've got you covered 7 days all on your own, I'm going somewhere. I don't know where, but I'm going to go somewhere. I love traveling. It's a random, weird, funny fact, but for me, something that brings me just so much joy is when I do go travel to grab a coffee, iced Americano, splash of cream. If anyone wants to know my coffee order, I grab a coffee in the new city that I'm in and I go for a walk. Like something about that is so like cup filling to me, and really just like makes my heart so warm. It's like you're in a new city, you're looking at all these different sites, new buildings, new streets, new coffee shop, and I would go and I would do that. And then I don't know what I would do for the rest of the days, but I know I would definitely, maybe I would just every single day go to a new city, grab a coffee, and then just fly out again.
I like that. That's good. Okay. Let's talk about some brands. So what is your brand crush right now? Just want a brand you see out there just killing it. They're doing all the right things.
Oh man. As a dietitian, I really love Siggi's, the Icelandic yogurt. I've always been a big fan of those from a nutrition perspective, but also taste. I'm a huge fan of Perfect Bars. I know they've been around for a while, but I just really love their bars, and I don't know, I always have them in my fridge, so it's one of my favorites. And then there is a company that does like spinach and lettuces. I think they're here in Chicago, but I could be wrong. It's called Bright Farm. And it sounds so dietitian of me to say, but truly their lettuce does taste amazing. And it's super soft, but yet still crunchy. So I really like their stuff. And I am an okay like salad lover. Like I don't love salads, but if there's a good one, I like it. And I will say when a salad is made with bright greens, I do tend to enjoy it.
That's great. Yeah, those are all good choices. I think Perfect Bar is a really good one. My 3-year-old daughter, she would not eat, I would say about 75% of her calories come from Perfect Bars. So she got the little snack size ones, and we go through a few boxes of those a week, which is pretty amazing. But
I love them. I mean, it's just like you're eating peanut butter at this point, but somehow they formed it into the bars. It's great. I mean, I would do it anyways, but they just make it easier for me.
Awesome. Another big one. This is a deep question for you. So, what is your superpower and why?
I think about this a lot, not in a narcissistic way, but just in a reflection way. What do I bring to the world? And I think my superpower is marrying two things, marrying the logistic, technical skill that I've always had, always been pretty book smart, always been pretty logical, and just marrying that with the compassion that I have for people. I love hearing people's stories. Just building those connections with humans on Earth is so valuable, and just connecting the two together. I know there are plenty of people who are super logical and just completely miss the compassion standpoint. And they're like, my way or the highway, I don't understand why you don't get it. And then you have people who are so compassionate, but just struggle with the logistics of Krebs cycle is really hard to understand, you guys. Like it really is. And so marrying the two together is something that I've always been really passionate about. I care about people a lot, and I really, truly try to be authentic as much as I can, which is so hard in this, social media Gen Z world that we're living in right now. But I try my best to be my weird, quirky self, and marrying those two together.
What's something that you do for yourself every day to help with either mental or physical wellness?
Besides my iced Americano splash of cream.
Besides that.
That is truly something that I do look forward to.
Yeah.
But besides that, something that I do daily to make sure, that I'm filling in my own cup. I love like gratitude and just thinking about what I'm grateful for. It's summer in Chicago right now, so it's just great to go on for a walk after work and just, we're really lucky to be here and to be able to do the jobs that we love. And so thinking about what I'm grateful for really brings a lot of perspective. Those small things that we may, really may affect our day are truly minute. And so it's always important for me to bring it back to that. And I'm lucky that people trust me with their nutrition. I'm lucky that they look up to me and really take my recommendations seriously. Not everyone gets that. And so, I'm grateful for that every day. But expressing that gratitude is tough for me. I'm working on it. It's really hard, but at least to myself, I'll always make sure that I say some sort of gratitude.
That's awesome. Yeah. The day, the time moves so fast. So I think it is important to self-reflect for certain. Awesome. Well, Christina, we really appreciate the time today. Before we drop, where can the listeners find you on social or online?
Yeah. So online, you can find me on my Instagram at Christina Y Chu. A good old Google search never hurts as well too. I think there's someone above me. I think there's another Christina Chu, unfortunately, who has a little bit more SEO than I do. But Christina Chu Nutrition, you should be right in the ballpark. I do have a website. It's www.christinaychu.com. And I do speaking engagements, working with clients one-on-one. So there is a contact form on that website. And if you had any questions or any inquiries at all, you can do so there or just finding me on social.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for the time. It was awesome chatting with you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Christina. Great to meet you.
Of course.
Bye.
Have a good one.